After a very successful outing against the Nashville Predators, the Jets are now welcoming the Dallas Stars into Winnipeg. What can the Jets expect from a team that is extremely talented and one of the top teams in the Central? We'll dive into all of that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode is brought to you by Jace Medical. Empower yourself when you get a Jace case, offering you a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jacemedical.com. That's Jase medical.com. Now, like I said at the top of the episode, obviously Winnipeg just came off a very big game against the Nashville Predators, a 6-3 victory. Talked about it on the last episode, so if you missed that and weren't really sure how the game went and what specifically the Jets did well or perhaps didn't do as well, you should check that episode out. Long and short of it is, the Jets forwards had a pretty good night, and Winnipeg only had a few minor blemishes on what was a pretty dominant 5v5 performance. Now, the thing with the Predators is that as decent of a team as they can be at times, let's be honest, Nashville is not exactly a great squad. Are they terrible? No, I wouldn't say that. But, compared to some of the other teams the Jets might face in the very near future, perhaps not nearly as good as, say, a Dallas Stars roster, right? Dallas is a very strong team and one that I think Winnipeg is going to have a modicum of trouble against. Now, Dallas is, I think, second in the Central right now. Very interesting team when you look at their roster. The top line is Jason Robertson, Rope Huntz, Joe Pavelski, followed by the second line of Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, and Evgeny Dodonov. Then you've got Marchment, Duchene, and Seguin on your third line. And finally, Steele, Foxa, and Smith, Craig Smith on your fourth line. When you look at this team, you realize that it's kind of oddly arranged. You've got like a really quality top nine with arguably I would say 3 top 6 quality lines. The fact that Marchment, Duchene, Seguin is your third line is pretty nutty, right? You don't really see a team with this much skill putting guys like Duchene and Seguin on a third line, right? That the Stars can do this and run 3 different, very interesting units gives the Jets some reasonably difficult matchups, right? This is going to be a tough game. And Dallas is one of those teams that can hit you on transition. They're fast, they're skilled, and, their defense is actually pretty decent. It's Suter, Heiskanen, Lindell, Hakanpää, and then Harley and Lundqvist. So all around, pretty solid team. And then, in net, it's Ottinger and Wedgwood. So Winnipeg is going to have to be really careful, right? This is a Stars team that is very dangerous on the counter. They've got tons of in-zone offensive skill. And, the thing with the Jets is that goaltending-wise, Winnipeg is sometimes won out with their, Hellebuck performances against Dallas. I'm not sure that that's going to be the case this time. I feel like Hellebuck's form recently hasn't been superb, right? But it's not like the Stars have been a lockdown perfect team either. Past couple of games, they've had a little bit of an uneven streak, right? They've just beaten the Blue Jackets yesterday, but then earlier lost to the Bruins and Canucks and, kind of had to scrape by against both Calgary and the Oilers. So Dallas perhaps not as dominant as in previous seasons, but make no mistake, this team has a lot of skill, a lot of depth, and I really feel like Winnipeg is going to have to be extremely careful, especially when it comes to being on the PK. Right, this power play has a number of really talented players. Hintz and Robertson, obviously, with Heiskin and Anchor, what should be a monster first unit. Pavelski and Ben providing your more veteran presences. And then, the second unit, you offer guys like Dadonov, Duchene, and Seguin, right? All great passers and very good shooters, even if perhaps guys like Seguin and Duchene are more towards the end of their career than their primes. But overall, Dallas has a ton of skill and a ton of depth. I think it's going to be really hard for the Jets to come away with, both points, but I do think the Jets have a really good opportunity to get at least one. And given that this is going to be on home ice and the Jets don't have to travel, that could be a really nice advantage. Is this going to be a game that I'm expecting Winnipeg to win or anything like that? Absolutely not. But I think if the Jets really want to be taken seriously and seen as like a legitimate playoff threat, you've got to be able to perform against top teams. They've beaten up on teams like Arizona, St. Louis, and Nashville recently, but unfortunately fell short against, Vegas, the Rangers, and a few others over the past few weeks. So, beating up on bad teams, always fun, but the Jets are going to have to be able to take care of business against quality opponents. And that's kind of where I sort of wonder if the Jets are going to be able to really up the tempo against top teams. We've seen them do it at times against Vegas. So I do think the Jets certainly have the ability to show up against Dallas, but whether they will, well, that is a little bit more up in the air. But in previous years, the Jets and Stars have generally played close games. So let's hope that Winnipeg shows up, puts on a good performance, and comes away with a much-needed victory over a top Central Division rival. If the Jets beat the Stars, it'd be really nice. Obviously, it's not like a must-have, but I'd like to at least see the Jets play quality competitive hockey against a top team. I'm going to predict a 3-2 Jets victory. Give me your score predictions in the comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Now, in talking about Winnipeg and sort of where the team is at, I thought I would also talk about what this team still needs, like roster-wise. Where is this squad strong and where could it use a little bit of an upgrade? We'll talk about that in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at Parkview Advance. As a business owner, you realize there are times when receivables might fall behind. But that doesn't mean you need to fall behind on vendor payments, payroll, or rent. For more than 25 years, Parkview Advance has helped businesses secure working capital. They can get you anything from $5,000 to $1.5 million. Parkview Advance can approve your working capital in as little as 24 hours. And for those of you who know that time is money, having a very short turnaround time for working capital is a critical advantage, especially for small businesses that maybe have some tight operating timelines and costs. It's a much easier process than you might imagine, and we invite the many entrepreneurs that are locked on NHL fans to give them a call at 203-675-0071 or go to parkviewadvance.com to learn more. If your business needs working capital, call Parkview Advance today. Parkview Advance, helping businesses with their working capital. Go to parkviewadvance.com. I also wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Collective. Obviously, this is a very important time for a lot of you who perhaps run small businesses, right? Maybe you do it on your own, and you're an army of one, but you still need a CPA, a bookkeeper, you need separate payroll solutions, and so much more. Let Collective take care of the paperwork while you take care of business. After all, being somebody who might be on your own doing all of this stuff, it's a huge pain in the butt, and you are much stronger when you're together. And that's why Collective is here to help. They're the #1 financial solution for freelancers, contractors, and self-employed entrepreneurs that lets you focus on your passion, not the paperwork. They know that if your business of one makes over $80,000 a year, you will find the most value from their services. You can join thousands of solopreneurs who have saved an average of $10,000 per year on taxes with Collective structure. Right now, Collective is offering 1 month free and no onboarding fee when you go to collective.com/lockedonnhl and tell them Locked On NHL sent you. That's a $550 value for free when you go to collective.com/lockedonnhl and tell them Locked On NHL brought you there. That's collective.com/lockedonnhl. And again, tell them Locked On NHL sent you. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you for rejoining us as we talk about, what the Jets still need roster-wise. Obviously, Winnipeg is in a pretty good spot in most areas when it comes to stuff like the forward depth, right? Up front, the Jets are pretty deep and they're very skilled. They'll eventually get Gabriel Vilardi back, and even without Vilardi, this team has some really nice matchup ability against other quality opponents. Maybe not as deep as like a Dallas or Vegas, partly because with Vegas, I always feel like it's a stylistic thing, right? The way that they play lends itself really nicely to how their roster is set up. They've got guys who are very good at capitalizing in rapid transition encounters, all that fun stuff, which makes them a really annoying team to play. For the Jets, Winnipeg's just built to be really, really strong at 5v5. They can own possession of the puck, they can create chaos down low, and increasingly they're finding more and more scoring prowess from guys like Mason Appleton, Nino Niederreiter, and their depth players who can supplement a top six that apparently is starting to put 2 and 2 together, right? Like the top line is looking more and more like a legit top line. The second line of Perfetti, Nemesnikov, and Ehlers, even though they don't actually play as much as the second line, they're still a really lethal unit together and very skilled. And, your third line of Nino, Lowry, and Appleton remains your absolute breadwinners. So the Jets, depth-wise and skill-wise, they've got lots to burn. Where I think the Jets really have a big need, though, really comes down to the defense, right? More than anything, the Jets lack back-end mobility. Even if they added somebody who's like a halfway decent two-way puck mover on the back end, I think it'd be a transformative presence, right? Because this blue line, as it is, it just lacks foot speed and, sometimes gets caught very flat-footed. I think, Nate Schmidt's decline has really put a big question mark for the Jets defense for the present and future. As much as everyone loves Schmitty and, he's got a great personality and is always very fun to be around, on ice, his performance has really declined, and he hasn't really seemed to been able to adapt his game to his body. That's something that I thought Enstrom did really well, and we've talked about it before. Like, a lot of people saw Enstrom be small and get bodied and think that he wasn't really able to defend all that effectively. But the thing with Enstrom was that he made it very difficult to actually get the puck to the net. He used his stick to kind of sweep pucks away, and he was absolutely a real pain in the butt because despite not being very fast, it just was very difficult to maneuver with his positioning and his stick placement, always shutting down lanes, making, passing and shooting lanes a lot more difficult to get pucks through. He just was an annoyance. And I think that's where Schmidt could honestly stand to add some of that to his game. Right now, he's trying to still rely on his mobility, but that isn't really his strongest feature anymore. I think Schmidt can honestly be a lot more effective if he perhaps looks to work within the restrictions of his body and his mobility and skating. But, otherwise, I mean, even if Schmidt does that, I still feel like the mobility and two-way presence of somebody like Ville Heinola would be a lot more effective, right? We saw Heinola really look great early in preseason, and then of course he got injured and is due back sometime in the next few weeks. Hopefully he starts skating soon. I think he is due more towards like the new year, right? Which is not going to be great for the Jets. Obviously this defense has had some real vulnerabilities. We've seen, opposing teams take advantage of it, but at least Gabriel Vilardi is coming back relatively soon. He has been skating, I believe, with some kind of a brace recently. Just intro skates, nothing too crazy. So don't get excited, but that he's kind of getting healthier. And, In previous years, I would have thought the Jets needed another forward, but with the team being as it is, I think the Jets might be able to get away with what they've got so far. And they have a chance to perhaps add like a Rucker McGroarty towards the end of the college season, so keep an eye out for that. Rucker's been tearing it up at the NCAA level. He's, I believe, the top scorer in college right now, and given his scoring rates and what he's doing, I feel like the next level for him is at this point going pro. So, assuming that the Jets forward group doesn't really change a lot and they don't bring in like another Nino Niederreiter type, I think Rucker might legit get a shot to become a bottom six threat if he does really well through the remainder of the season. But even if he doesn't make it, this team is pretty deep and very skilled. They add like a legitimate top four defender somewhere in there that's perhaps more than just Heinola, and this team is legitimately cooking. I think that there's a lot of promise for the squad, and hopefully Winnipeg can make the most of it and have a deep playoff run in a few months. But of course, until then, the Jets have a pretty difficult test upcoming over the next week or so. They're going to be facing a lot of Eastern Conference teams and some squads that they really don't see all that much. We'll talk about who presents the most annoying threats in just a little bit. But before we go any further, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Jace Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I, and we get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and who sits. I'm thankful for that connection we have, and today I want our chat to be a little more personal. I just learned that you can get a free, or not a free, but you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications, which for a lot of you is probably very helpful and something that you might be able to make a lot of use of. You realize what that means, bring on extended travel, bring on the next natural disaster or supply chain issue. You're covered, my friend. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio prescriptions. And this is possible because of our friends at Jace Medical. Go online right now at Jace Medical to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jace: "I'm thankful for the service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut my pills in half to keep it going, but with ordering a year supply, now you don't have to worry about that as much. You can get a 12-month supply and a antibiotic kit with Jace Medical, and it helps me feel secure. If you or someone would love to get some peace of mind by having a year supply of any daily med, go to jacemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off your purchase." Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you for joining us in tonight's closing thoughts as we talk about Winnipeg's upcoming slate of games after they take on Dallas. Obviously, the Stars are really good, but they're not going to be the only really strong team the Jets face over the next 2 weeks. Winnipeg then has to face the New Jersey Devils on Tuesday. And we all know that the Devils, despite some turbulence this season, have a legitimately very difficult team. Now, unfortunately for the Devils, they've been injured a lot recently, and it has had a pretty tangible impact on their performance so far. I think Hischier and Hughes have occasionally missed games. I haven't been following them that closely, but I know it's been a little bit rocky health-wise. They're sitting at like a 7-5-1 record so far, which it's not terrible, right? That's where Winnipeg roughly is. But given the injuries and stuff and how difficult the Metro Division can be to stay afloat, I'm sure the Devils would love to have a healthier situation, especially with a team that, quite frankly, when it's at full strength, is legitimately considered one of the top rosters in the NHL. Really tough game, though, even if the Devils are going to be injured. I'm not sure who's going to be available for this one. So closer to the date, we'll probably talk about who's going to be healthy and who can join the lineup. But after that, the Jets then have a few days off before they welcome the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo is certainly not an easy team, but I feel like this is a relatively winnable game, given how the Jets have been at even strength this year and how strong they are. The Sabres, not an easy team, but they're like 7-6-1 so far. So not a team that I'm perhaps nearly as concerned about, but certainly not an easy pushover either. So, I think these two teams are going to be tough. And then, the Jets are going to have one last home game on Saturday, the second half, being this of a back-to-back after taking on the Buffalo Sabres. They then have the Arizona Coyotes. So the Yotes should be a game the Jets can win, but that's if they're feeling up to it after, having just played the Sabres a few hours before. And then we get to see the two teams from Florida the following week in Tampa Bay and the Panthers on the road. So, yeah, this next stretch could be pretty challenging for the Jets. I think that there's a number of games here where Winnipeg might be fortunate to scratch out a point just because of the circumstances of travel and everything. But if any team is capable of winning the day at 5v5, it's this Jets team. So I'm going to say out of the next 5 games after the Stars game, I think the Jets could go 3-1-1. That's my prediction. Let me know how you think the Jets are going to do in the comments below or at my social medias, NHL Living Loco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day, every day. If you like what you're hearing, again, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, we'll see you next week. Have a great one, and go Jets, go.